So, thank you very much, Yara. And I would also like to thank you all for joining this event. I'm very excited to share a bit of my research concerning demonic magic. I'm a PhD candidate in Ben-Gurion University at the Department of Free Thought. And I'm also an intern as a medical student, an intern in Soroka Hospital. And I would like to share with you some of my research about demonic magic. So, if I'll ask you if these horned and winged figures look like demons, most of you will probably answer yes, of course, right? However, you probably couldn't guess that this little prince is the notorious Lucifer, this one, and there is a good reason for that. Demons depicted as ugly, monstrous, deformed. We usually can't imagine them in our mind to be in the shape of a human king that dressed quite chicy. This Lucifer is one of 100 demons in a Hebrew catalog of demons named Chochmat Shlomo, or the Wisdom of Solomon, which actually derive from a Latin source named Sapientia Solomonis, the Wisdom of Solomon, as the title of this work shows. This catalog of demons belongs to a very long magical tradition, as we will see, that reveal a dynamic relationship between demons and magicians. No more banishing demons, but rather summoning and using them to fulfill the practitioner's will. But first, a short introduction. In my research, I work mainly on texts that scholars often describe as Solomonic magic. That is a tricky term, deceptive as demons, if you want. But for now, let's assume it to be a category of magical texts that deal with practical methods of binding demons and spirits. Those texts can be found in various languages, including Hebrew, Latin, Italian, French, and also Greek. The most famous of them all is definitely the Key of Solomon. The Key of Solomon is a collection of works that the earliest ones can be found in manuscripts from the 15th century in Latin and Italian. Attributed to King Solomon, this text concerned with summoning demons and forcing them to fulfill the practitioner's wishes. In one of the manuscripts of the Key of Solomon, there is a diagram, you can see it here, in which the magician is represented as a king standing in the center of the circle with a crown on his head. You can see the crown here, and the wand in his hand, surrounded by all of his tools. You can see them here. You can see a book, a knife, a sword, and censers. Finally, there is a medallion, which you can see here, also known as a lamen or pentacle, that is supposed to bind the summoned demon outside of the circle. It should be engraved on a specific metal or a piece of parchment. Each instrument that you can see here is then consecrated with a special adjuration that utilizes magical or angelical and holy names. The practitioner is expected to act as a king, controlling the demonic entity. While some scholars wish to trace the origin of the clavicula, I see no reason to assume that such texts actually exist. The texts named Clavicula Solomonis, like many other magical texts, are highly eclectic, derived from multiple sources. In fact, one of the earliest mentions of the magic of Solomon is by a 14th century Catalan magician who informs us, and I quote, this is a translation from the Latin, all 72 idioms of power, but especially the 4 that Magica Solomonis has been constructed upon: Greek, Hebrew, Latin, and Arabic, upon which sciences and the grammar of the philosophers have been similarly constructed and written. Thus, the idea that texts of Solomonic magic derived from sources of different languages already appeared in the 14th century. Anyone who reads texts like the Clavicula can see that almost immediately. Furthermore, the eclectic approach of the scribes made many distinct texts with the name of the Clavicula. Faust, according to Goethe's vision of this legend, relied on the key of Solomon when he dealt with the spirit. You can see this line here: "The key of Solomon shall serve me well." Already in 1835, Robert Talbot, the translator of Faust to English, added a note concerning this key of Solomon, and you can see the note here. Clavicula Solomonis is the title, I am informed, of more than one treatise on magic. In his research, Federico Barbierato claimed that from at least the 17th century onwards, the Italian title Clavicola di Salomone was used as a header for a variety of different works, thus creating a group of different texts that shared a title. The opposite phenomenon is also attested. As Boudet and Veronese have shown, a work that was known as the Clavicula Solomonis in the 15th century was elsewhere entitled Liber Negromantiae, the Book of Necromancy. Those phenomena prove the fluidity of those texts. There is no stable or firm text, even if scribes expressed the belief that such ultimate form exists. Such claims were often an apologetic stance arising from the existence of alternative texts, and they reveal a polemical discourse that should be taken into account. Many scribes that were engaged with Solomonic texts often presented themselves as agents of ancient wisdom, so titles often display the false unified framework that refer to an ancient source. This was probably the case, for example, of the scribe of the work of Solomon the Wise called his Clavicula, a version of the Clavicula Solomonis, or one of many texts that called Clavicula Solomonis. The scribe of this work claimed that it was truly copied verbum pro verbo, thereby not only branding himself as a trustworthy copyist, but also condemning untrustworthy ones. The existence of a true copy discloses existence of a false one. Regardless of whether the scribe of the work of Solomon indeed copied it verbum pro verbo, his work, and probably his sources, is extremely eclectic. The scribe was undoubtedly aware of this eclecticism, since he marked portions of the manuscript with labels such as alia oratio, another prayer, or just alia, another. The scribe and his sources referred to other sources that might have been similar to those he was acquainted with, or completely distinct from them. These markers of eclecticism reveal a mismatch between the unity of the whole work and the textual units of it. These phenomena are present in manuscript culture in general and in all kinds of open books, namely works that were constantly improved and updated. It is especially the case of manuals that contains a mix of instructions and formulas that are interwoven, where the transition points between an instruction and formula are often used by scribes and editors to unravel the text and rewrite it. The work of Solomon is such an open book, which the scribe felt free to enrich it as he saw fit, making his manuscript part of a dynamic process. Unlike the scribe of the work of Solomon, there are scribes who explicitly point to their different sources. An example for that is a Jewish scribe who composed the Hebrew Key of Solomon. in his words, Mafteach Shlomo, in 1729 in London. In general, in several places, he gave the reader a glance at his desktop, and upon it were at least 2 different keys. And I quote, "And I found in the Italian key the seal of Saturn, and also other seals, and they were not mentioned in the Hebrew key. And it is good to grasp the one and not let go of the other. Both will do equally well." By quoting King Solomon, the Jewish scribe stated that the Italian and the Hebrew keys, in plural, that were in front of him were of equal value, even though they were dissimilar. Unlike the scribe of the work of Solomon, he explicitly justified gathering materials from these 2 different keys. Like the Catalan magician that I've mentioned in the 14th century, this scribe admits that the truth or the good seal can be passed through different languages. This creates an apparent tension between the immaculate Genesis narratives that scribes often promote and their tendency to gather, edit, and rewrite their texts. I've started with this introduction just to make clear that even though it is easier for us to think about the Clavicula Solomonis, there is no such thing. Treating Clavicula Solomonis as one firm work without paying attention to the way the texts were produced means contradicting the textual evidence and partaking in an internal authenticity discourse, which is obviously not my intention. The approach I adopted for the study of the history of such texts is mainly reading them closely and looking for what Veronese already pointed out, their intertextual connections. While the Clavicula Solomonis is the most famous collection of text, the history of Solomonic magic does not start with it. The 15th century Latin Liber Billeth, the Book of Billeth, has a fascinating history. It is not a well-known work, although it was published by Boudet several years ago. In my work, I show it as a Latin fusion of 2 Hebrew texts, one of them dated back to the 11th century. Without getting into detail about those Hebrew texts, the Liber Billeth focuses on the invocation of Billeth, the king of demons, forcing him to appear in front of the eyes of the practitioner so he will fulfill his wishes. The verbal invocation takes the largest part of the ritual, but there are instructions for some non-verbal actions like fasting, creating a circle, a knife, a ring, a piece of parchment with certain names on it, etc. In a specific time, mostly Wednesday, the practitioners are instructed to enter a circle or a special room, which you can see here, the circle, with their equipment, where they start the invocation of the spirits. A typical invocation looks something like that. I quote, "In the name of Adonai, that is Lord, Sabaoth, that is armies, and in the names Yah, Adonai, Sabaoth, we conjure and bravely exorcise you, so you will appear in front of us without noise and without deformities." But why the demons answered the magician? According to Liber Billeth, the spirits, sometimes referred to as demons, demones, winds, venti, or evil spirits, maligni spiritus, they have 2 main reasons to obey the practitioner's commands. What I call an anatomical reason and an historical reason. Liber Billeth described that all the spirits were created out of 2 elements, fire or air. The aerial anatomy of the second type spirits forces them to come and answer the practitioner's call through what one might see as a sympathetic relation. The spirits that were created from the wind come like the wind, and they obey to the word that come out of the practitioner's mouth, which has its own aerial nature. But a sympathetic relation between those aerial elements, that is spirits, winds, and words, is not sufficient. And the historical reason brought up by the scribe, who explained that, quote, and upon those aerial spirits, a convention has been made, that whoever among those that will hear the exorcism of Solomon and the word which will come out from the name of the living God and of the mouth of the practitioner, and will not come, they will be crucified by most diverse punishment, both into leprosy and fells they would fall if they do not come instantly. End of quote. The word that the practitioner uttered, which is the name of the living God, threatened the spirits with all kinds of punishment, and more specifically, leprosy. The practitioner will later, during the ritual, remind the spirits of the convention by mentioning this leprosy threat again during a long exorcism. You can see it here. If you would be rebellious to our mighty creator and would wish to resist my words and commands, all of you will fall into the most impure leprosy, and all of you will die the worst death. Now, just pay attention that this is Liber Billeth, right? But we can find the same threat also in the Italian clavicula. And I quote, if you would be rebellious to your creator, refusing to obey his words and commands, all of you will fall into the most impure leprosy and die a deathly and cruel death. We can also find it in the work of Solomon the Wise that I mentioned earlier. And also in another Latin clavicula in the 16th century that was printed several years ago as a part of an interesting manuscript by Harms, Clark, and Peterson. You can see the book here, very nice one. And also in a 16th century work named Liber Supra Tria Nomina, in a book that was held by the famous English magician John Dee. Same threat. Last, it also appears, this time in English, in a printed version of the Key of Solomon that was edited by Samuel Maters, one of the founders of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn in London. And I quote, and if you yet resist our powerful conjuration, we shall pronounce against you this warrant of arrest in the name of God Almighty, and this definite sentence that you shall fall into dangerous disease and leprosy, and that in the sign of the divine vengeance, you shall all perish by a terrifying and horrible death. This textual unit is only one example of many, many others. Another interesting case is the case concerning the Catalogue of Demons. As I said at the beginning, this work named is Chochmat Shlomo, or the Wisdom of Solomon, which is based on a 15th century Latin text. This text is preserved in an incomplete Italian version in a 15th century manuscript, in which the beginning of the text, as well as its title, are missing. This is a folio of this manuscript, from this manuscript. We have at least 6 Hebrew manuscripts of this work, all of them presenting a catalog of 100 demons and a specific ritual that aimed to summon their kings in order to control them. When the magician wishes, he set up a magic circle in a specific place and time with specific physical conditions and call the kings of demons to arrive. Then 4 kings come, each from each side of the world, and the magician commands them to sign and consecrate the catalog he made. At the end of the ritual, the magician will have an activated catalog, so whenever he wishes, he opens the book, choose a demon, and call him. Each demon has his own abilities and his own army of demons or spirits, like this one, surprisingly enough, called Mahomet. And I quote, Mahomet has 200 demons, and their ability is to make birds, beasts, and animals speak. And they also make people walk without head, and they make people undress themselves naked while running and walking like animals. How useful is that, right? The scribe of this work surely knew a version of the clavicula, since he relies on it when it comes to the preparations of some ritualistic elements. The practitioner must do, in his words, que comanda la clavicula de Salomon. That is what the key of Solomon commands. After preparing the book, the practitioner then consecrates it by using formulas from different sources, some of them of Jewish liturgy. For example, the scribe translated Hebrew blessings that are used before reciting the Torah, Birkot Torah, and I quote. Actually, this is a quotation, and this I quote for my own translation of it. And then say this blessing. Bless the blessed God, blessed are you, God, our God, the King of the world, who given us the true law, the Torah, and placed an eternal life in us. Blessed are you, God, that gave the law. With that prayer and other prayers and adjuration, some of them are also from Hebrew, the catalogue of demons becomes holy, like the Torah. The way in which those demons depicted here, like human kings rather than monstrous demons, is also explained in the text that I've presented. The act of summoning demons is basically the magician's invitation for a terrorizing dialogue between two sides, the human and the demonic side. This is aggressive power struggle which the demon tries to win by scaring the magician. In a Hebrew version of another Solomonic text, it is explained that, and I quote, sometimes the earth beneath you will split, so you will see the heaven below. Sometimes you will see that the heaven were open and that the earth is raised towards them. And sometimes you will see terrible beasts coming to the circle and strange looking persons, and that a relative of yours is running from enemies with drawn swords while asking for your help. Everything that the mouth can speak and the ear can hear, they, the demons, will do anything to bring fear into your hearts. It seems that in Liber Billeth, different claviculae, and the Sapientia, the magician commands the demons to come with a certain harmless way. In Liber Billeth, for example, the magician commands the demons, and I quote, to appear in a beautiful human figure, perfectly elegant and humble, without any kind of trembling and fright. In the Italian clavicula, the magician tells the demons, run and come without noise, gentle and tamed, and without any of our fear. In the English clavicula, very close to the Liber Billeth, the magician and his followers say, we command you to appear with great respect and courtesy, and in a beautiful and human form. And in the Sapientia, it is very clear from the drawings, which are not always attached to the text, and from this description, quote, and they will be forced to fulfill the wish of the one who opened this book without fear and harm. Okay. There's not enough time to cover here the complex history of the text I've mentioned. They are really, really complicated history. And also the relation between the Sapientia, the Clavicula, Liber Billeth, and many more texts like that. My intention here was only to give some example that will make it clear that in front of us lays a wide and branched network of text. Now, after we saw the fluidity or the fluid nature of those texts, and the way textual units were used by scribes, we can point to different trends in the developments of the text. In the remaining time, I would like to show you how these texts have been transformed throughout the modern era by presenting some case studies. The first one is Kabbalization. At some point, texts of Solomonic magic have been identified with Kabbalah, and Kabbalists created new texts in order to include Kabbalistic terms in them. And when I say Kabbalist, I mean both Jewish Kabbalists and Christian Kabbalists. For example, while in the earlier versions of the clavicula, there is no mention of Kabbalah or Kabbalistic terms, not at all, the printed version of Samuel Mathers, as well as manuscripts from the 16th century onwards, there are some Kabbalistic terms. This is the case of some manuscript that contain the name of the 10 Sephirot within the magical circle, as this one. You can see this is the magical circle that the magician should stand at the center of it. Many names are written at the circle, but some of them are like Binah, you see it here, and Netzach, and all the rest 10 Sephirot. Here is another one. This is not actually a magic circle, but rather a kind of an amulet or a pentacle that the practitioner makes for the ritual. You can see here Keter, Chokhmah, Binah, Chesed, etc., all the 10 Sephirot. The earlier version of this amulet, let's call it like that, does not, this kind of these names of the 10 Sephirot doesn't appear. Okay. Some other manuscripts explicitly labeled as Kabbalistic, you can see a French one here, and even named sometimes Kabbalah Nigra et Alba, black and white Kabbalah, like maybe correspond to black and white magic, right? This is a manuscript that attributed to Faust, which contains the same catalog of demons from the 15th century Sapientia Salomonis, alongside invocations by the name of the 10 Sephirot, and you can see again Binah, Chesed, etc. Jewish Kabbalists were also interested in those texts, as the following Kabbalist who edited the Sapientia Salomonis. In his catalog, there are 72 demons that correspond with the 72 names of God. Furthermore, the demons are summoned with adjurations and that mentions Kabbalistic terms, and I quote, by the great name Heyeh, that is written on the Keter, which is crown, the first Sephirah, and by the 10 Sephirot. So you will come immediately. And if not, you will be excommunicated and banished from all the upper and lower worlds and from the 4 Abiyah worlds. These are clear references to the 10 Sephirot and the 4 Abiyah worlds, that is the 4 realms that are described in many Kabbalistic writings, the Atzilut, Briah, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. It is an attempt of a Jewish Kabbalist to incorporate Kabbalistic content in a text of Solomonic magic. This is not his only attempt, actually. He also changed the names of some demons in a very creative way. Look, for example, this one. This demon is from the 15th century Italian manuscript. You can see he looks like a fox. The seal of it is like a fox, and his name is Abzaidi. And in the later 19th century Hebrew manuscript, it calls Abetzach, but also looks like a fox. And in his own manuscript, this Kabbalist actually changes. Our Kabbalist transformed this name of Abzali or Abzach into the name Shu'alin. You can see Shu'alin from the Hebrew word Shu'al, that is a fox. He also listed demons with the names Cheima, Af, and Mashchit, which are anger, wrath, and destroyer. And he also included a demon named Gulab, which we know from earlier Kabbalistic writing as one of the names of the left side or impure Sephirot. The Italian Kabbalist Yohanan Alemano not only was familiar with several Solomonic texts, but also incorporated them into his own work. Interestingly, he referred to Solomonic ritual as Reshit Olam HaNevuah, that is the beginning of the prophecy world. And he extensively quoted passages from Liber Iuratus Honori, Liber Razielis, and many, many other Solomonic texts. According to Alemano, and this is the important one must use those methods if he wants to ascend and unify with God. The process of de-demonization is an interesting one and one of my favorites. In a fascinating book, Shavmaer and Veronese observed that the use of Solomonic magic formulas in exorcistic ritual, that is, ritual for banishing demons. It seems that not all practitioners were big fans of the idea that a demon will stand in front of them, and the same formulas that used to summon them were adopted for expelling them. Such text is the 70 Nations of Demons, Ein Umot de Mezikim in Hebrew, in which Solomonic formulas serve in a ritual for expelling demons that are listed just like in the catalogue of demons, with the appearance of a demon like Astarit, who is very well known in Solomonic texts as Astaroth, and Billeth, who we already met. This text actually was published 6 years ago by Professor Sarat Fatman without the Solomonic text, without the Solomonic context, in her book about the Jewish exorcism in early modern Ashkenaz. Unlike many obscure sacred names in other Solomonic texts, in this exorcistic manual, the names were chosen very carefully. They are always abbreviation of a biblical verse, which the scribe actually referred to. You can see here the sacred name, which I just transcribed here, which is an abbreviation of a biblical verse. In a fragment from the Cairo Geniza, probably from the 18th century, there is a manual for writing an amulet against spirits and demons with ritualistic elements. Some of the formulas in this amulet are known from earlier Solomonic texts. But my favorite example of de-demonization is the following manuscript. It is named The Golden Key, Mafteach HaZahav, and the author described it as a summary of the Key of Solomon. We know for a fact that the author had in his hand one of the Hebrew clavicula, since he gave some detailed references. For example, he refers to the chapter 16 in folio 8 of the clavicula. You can see it here, כמו שתראה במפתח, פרק י"ו, דף ח'. Chapter 16, folio 8. Where the reader should find detailed instructions concerning the blood that the practitioner should use for writing. This is a clear reference to folio 8, see, of one of the Hebrew clavicula, in which chapter 16, Yudvav, elaborate about the bet's blood that should be used for writing. You see here, midama atalef, the blood of the bets that were usually used in Solomonic text to write with as an ink. However, unlike the clavicula, and unlike our modern understanding of a summary, or as he pointed it as kitzur, Yeah? The scribe here omitted any reference to demons or demonic magic. He actually transformed the clavicula into a manual for making talismans. Those talismans contain elements and formulas of the Hebrew clavicula, but here we can't find demons or magic circles, but only some writing tools. Sorry. The adjuration in the clavicula are now adjurations that are used to consecrate the talisman. The magician here does not refer to demons whatsoever. This is not the only case of talismanic use of Solomonic texts in what I considered as the popularization trend. But what I consider the most obvious popularized form of Solomonic magic is the amulets that can be found in almost any New Age shop around the world today. You can see them as medallions, as rings, as a tile, in all kinds of forms. In the earlier text, such as the 15th century Liber Billeth, the magician is instructed to bear with him a piece of parchment with some holy names on it in order to intimidate the demons. However, the practitioners of the 15th century Italian Clavicula Solomonis is instructed to hold a set of pentacles. You can see them here, or some of them here, which is, as I said, pieces of metal or parchment with different symbols on them. This is in the Italian Clavicula Solomonis of the 15th century. In later keys, this small set of pentacles have been replaced with a huge set, each one addressing a different purpose. It is actually a catalog of pentacles. You can see here an Hebrew one, but there are many, many, many others of this kind. A catalog of pentacles in many languages, actually. The development of different catalogs of pentacles were sometimes disconnected from the Solomonic ritual at all. Like this catalog that Alessia Balushi brought to my attention. So it is not surprising to find them outside the manuscripts, detached from any demonic meaning, and you can see people bear it with them, buying it online, buying it in New Age shops, and just wear it as an amulet. More recent case is this talisman that can be bought online. According to the seller, this Solomonic talisman aims, and I quote, to provide people with emotional security, success in career, good and stable health, luck, fertility, love, partnership, evil eye protection, spiritual elevation, any and every good thing a person could want for one's family and oneself. The talisman also seeks to provide protection, overcome financial obstacles, and improve one's overall well-being. If we look closely, it seems that the scribe of this talisman used demonic seal that he took from a catalog of demons that appear in Hebrew manuscript of the clavicula. This is one of the Hebrew manuscript of the clavicula in the Hebrew. You can see here the seals of the demon that names in the Hebrew version Paevnon, but it is really known as Paimon in many other manuscripts. And this is the seals, right? Some other popularization processes, aim to aid the reception of Solomonic objects by particular audiences. This is the case of Samuel Mater's vision of a seal that can be bought online as an amulet. You can see this is Samuel Mater's seal, one of many, again, many other pentacles, and the same one that you can buy online as an amulet. Most of Mater's seals contain a Hebrew biblical verse in the external circle. This one is an exception, since it contains a biblical verse in Latin, not Hebrew. Mater's seal of its Latin verse can be bought as is in eBay, as you saw here. However, a website named Kabbalah Insights created a version in which the Latin verse was replaced with the Hebrew one, probably to fit the idea of this seal as Hebrew, Jewish, Kabbalistic object. Sometimes the seal is completely detached from its obvious source. This is the case of this seal of Mater's, which Mater's claimed, and I quote from his book, "It is proper for invoking spirits of the nature of Mars." You can see here the name of the spirit Ma'adimiel. Ma'adim is the Hebrew word for Mars. Okay? So it's reasonable to use it for invoking spirits of the nature of Mars. The same seal can be found online, and I quote, "for fertility and bravery, kamea pirion ve'ometz." And I also quote from here, "These amulets are based on the book of the seals of Solomon, as well as from an ancient book." There are also cases in which the author seems to overlook technical information, treating every drawing as a potential amulet. In certain editions of Mater's version of the clavicula, there is a page, you can see it here, where all kinds of drawings appear. The reader is referred to these drawings while he is reading through direct references. For example, you can see it here. Here followed the form of the circle, and in parentheses, see figure 81. If you go to figure 81, you can see it here, figure 81. This is the circle, right? Very straightforward. An online seller offers this page with the technical terms of references as figure 1, figure 2, etc., as an amulet against evil eye. While he overlooked the technical terms, or maybe not, he did not ignore the foreign nature of this amulet, as he wrote. "For the sake of the historical truth, I should mention that all the seals that attributed to him, to King Solomon, were made by Jesuit monks. In the following series of amulets that are called the amulets or seals of Solomon, I took out all the foreign and inappropriate elements." This is a very clear evidence that the practice of magical writing is still active today. Whether demons are friends or foes, useful or useless, Solomonic texts give us a unique and fascinating glance into the libraries and desks of magicians who took part in a cultural and intellectual activities. Thank you. Now it's a great time for a question, I think. Yara?
Yes, yes, thank you very much. Let's go over the chat room together, because there was, if you'll scroll up, there was, yeah, but there was something about King Solomon and the Shamir. Let me see. Okay. Did the demons leave once they finished building the temple? Was Solomon able to send them back?
Okay, that's an interesting question. There are actually lots and lots of legends about Solomon and his use of demons. There are Muslim and Christian and Jewish legends, and they are all blended together as legends are oftenly does. So it's a bit a tricky question to answer whether the demons could escape or not. According to some manuscripts of the Clavicula Solomonis, the demons did escape. They escaped from a vase which they were trapped into by some sorcerers that opened the vase, and all the demons came out, and now we can use them. We can use them actually in magic. So yes.
Okay. Let's look over the questions together, because you said that you wanted to read them.
Yes, I want to read them, but there are so many. So
yes. Okay.
Okay, I see here Mahomet
yes.
sounds very much like the cap in Bolkov's The Master of the Margarita. Mahomet, it's Mahomet, it's Muhammad, right? Here. I think it takes part in a polemical polemical discourse against Muslim. It's not so often, but we does find it in some specific magical traditions that Christian and Jews can practice magic and actually be successful in that, but Muslim can't. We see it in some texts. Yes.
Okay. There is a very interesting question here. Do you plan on using your knowledge on of demons in your medical care?
I always wanted to be a witch doctor. This is what I'm gonna do. Probably no. Actually, I do find it very interesting, since magic does exist in a form of beliefs and ideas in the hospital, where people really look for help of any kind. That's something that I can see very often. But it's again, it depends on how and why and what we are actually called magic, and it's related to our definition of magic, because, well, reading Psalms near the bedsides of the patient might seem like magic for someone, and just a prayer for another, right? So it's also depends on that. Long story.
Why is it good that the demons were able to escape and we were able to use them? Why they used, were they used only for good, or were they also used for bad?
No, of course, they were used for so many things. Really, so many, from traveling upon a cloud to invisibility and to kill an enemy. So the variety of uses of these demons. But I just said it's good that they escaped, so we can use them, because that's why there is a Clavicula Solomonis, right? According to the legend. If they couldn't escape, we couldn't have the use of them, because they were trapped. So that's why I said it's good.
Okay. How would you characterize the relationship between the Solomonic text and the Picatrix, via Pico della Meadola and Maricillo Fusini?
Yeah, I saw this one now. Okay, this is a great question, because I was deeply interested in Pico's thought and his relation to Solomonic text because of his teacher of Kabbalah, which is Yochanan Alemano, who I already mentioned here. I'm not sure that Pico knew about demonic magic. I'm not sure he was a fan of this kind of magic. But it's tricky because Pico was condemned in several works of Pico were condemned by the church, and it was in a state of a very great criticism. So I'm not sure he referred to demonic magic in a very honest way, let's say like that. However, I do think that Pico, as well as Marcello Ficino, both are we should refer to as a person that have an interest in more in the Picatrix and astrological magic or astral magic more than Solomonic magic. I'm not sure why yet, and I'm not sure, except for the criticism of the church, of course. I'm not sure why this is the exact direction of interest, but yeah, that's how I will characterize the relationship between them. But it's a very complicated one, I have to say. It's very complicated because I have an article about this, about Pico's idea that came into Alemano, and Alemano used it to interpret Solomonic magic. So I'm not sure that Pico didn't know about it at all, or didn't, and was very honest about it. I'm not sure.
Okay, maybe two other questions. Is there non-demonic magic?
Of course. Of course, actually, one of the very interesting trends, which I didn't put it here, is a process of to angelic. I don't know how to say it, angelicize, or to make it angelic. There are from the 16th century, there are attempts to get formulas of Solomonic magic and to address them towards angels. So to that we'll call angelic magic. Actually, all those names, yes, angelic magic, demonic magic, all these kind are really problematic because now we still need to do something with the magic. I'm using it here only because it's very easy to me to do it, not because I'm really a fan of the word magic at all. So. But okay. Yes, there is a demonic magic, angelic, you can call it angelic magic, and etc.
Another very interesting question: what is to prevent demons from doing evil for their own purpose? Why is it assumed that they were only here to be used by the magicians? Do the magicians have some kind of a hold on them?
Oh yes, of course. The magician, all the manuscripts that I described and I mentioned present the magician as their king, or the one who controlled them. So they don't have, once they came, they don't have any way to escape unless the magician gave them what they call the license to depart. So unless the magician release them, they are in his control, and they can't do anything. Actually, that's how they were described. In some Solomonic texts, there is a very wonderful quotation. I'm quoting now from the Hebrew from the English translation of the Hebrew source. You see something like that. the demons came to the magician, and the magician showed them the pentacle or the amulet, and they tell him, okay, if you wouldn't have this kind of amulet, we will kill you and all your friends. So it's very clear that the relation between the demons and the magician is a very aggressive one. The magician is controlling the scene, and if they could, they will run, they will escape, but they can't.
Okay, and maybe last question. Do you know if modern or Catholic exorcism is based on these works?
Oh, that's, well, $1 million question. No, I'm not sure this is the case. However, there are the modern Catholic exorcism is not one. There are many. There is the Roman rite and many other rites and exorcistic ritual. The modern one, the one that is practiced today, as far as I know, and I don't know a lot about it, is not. But there were rites that were. So the book I've mentioned of Shav Maher and Veronese is exactly about this kind of an exorcistic ritual that uses the formulas of Solomonic text to banish demons in a very Christian exorcistic ritual.
Okay, Gal, thank you very much. If you can take down the presentation, you will be able to see some of our audience.
Of course.
I will open your mic so you can say thank you. And wait, how do I do that? Okay, you can all unmute yourself if you want to say thank you to Gal. Many asked if
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Darabah, thank you very much.